Father God, just thank you for your goodness to us, Lord. Thank you for the way that you are in full control of everything, and that everything that's going on in our world is according to your will and will come to the end that you want it to come to.
Amen.
And so we just thank you, Lord, for the hope that we have in knowing that we are going to be with you. So, Father, I just pray for our small meeting tonight, that you would just show us some things that we don't know and just encourage us in these things, we pray. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So, as you'd expect, there's been quite a lot of things going on recently around the world, and I don't need to tell you that. But I'm just going to look tonight at 4 major areas. The first one is this is quite a pivotal year for elections in various countries that could be interesting. So we'll look at that. Then we'll look at Israel and what's going on, of course, with Israel. A little bit of an update there. Asking the question, the third one is the UK leading the WEF charge, as it were, especially under Starmer now? So we'll look at that. And then the last one is to look at tabletop exercises and the next contagion of 2025. So hopefully you'll find something in there. It's not all doom and gloom, even though it perhaps sounds that way. So that's where we're going, really. This is not, if you like, well, it is biblically based, but I'm not going to refer much to scriptures apart from in one place, just because it's really a bit of an update. So I think we all know where we are within the scriptures in many ways. So, well, without ado, let's look at some new leaders of nations. Well, having got over the Trump election now, and obviously the next president of the United States, who will take up office, I believe, on the 20th of January, which is not far away now. So we brace ourselves for that. I think the world is bracing itself for that. I think Israel can't wait for that to happen, because obviously he's a supporter of Israel. But it does seem that in the run-up, not only in the elections, there was a lot of funny things going on. I mean, after all, the election campaigning was quite unprecedented this time. They spent billions, literally, on this election in America, which they've never done before. I mean, they really did spend a lot of money on it. And of course, all of that was really to do with dirty tricks and to try and stop Trump winning, and in some places even getting on the ballot box, which seemed to just go on and on. There were 2 attempted assassinations of him, weren't there? One that did get his ear, and there was another one as well. And the one where he got shot in the ear appeared to be allowed by the FBI and that, who were there to so-called guard him, and yet they seem to be looking at all the evidence that's come up. They seem to have turned a blind eye to it and let him get a shot off or 2 before. I don't know whether they arrested him or shot him. I can't remember in the end. Shot him, did they? Yeah. They tried to impeach him on several occasions. They've tried to again, get it so he's unable to stand. I mean, the last one they tried to get him on was that he had classified documents in his own home when he was the president before. But in a sense, you would expect that, because when he's at home, he's surrounded by FBI and everybody anyway, so it's a secure location. But no one says anything about the fact that President Biden has got even more of documents that he shouldn't have at his home, and yet that's okay. So you can see that there's something wrong going on here. But anyway, despite all the rhetoric and all the things that were going on, Trump has been elected, and he's getting his sort of cabinet together and so on. So we look at how that's going to go. And as I stated in my last talk, why Trump, why now? I highlighted the fact that Trump is not the man that we may think he is. We have to be very wary of him, really, because although he is very much in favour of Israel, if you look at his background, his background is very much in line with the WEF and people like that in many ways. So watch out. But the American churches have certainly started to look upon him as the saviour, which is bad news, isn't it? Really, because that means they're taking their eyes off Jesus, for one thing. But of course, he's not going to be anything like a saviour for the church there. But anyway, despite the fact that he is a supporter of Israel, and I think he will overturn a number of things that Biden has done in favour of Israel, we must beware of him. That said, let's look. Canada has got an election this coming year, and President Trudeau is the one that's obviously in the firing line there, because he's been in power now for quite some time. But they have a first past the post system, and they have changed or adjusted the amount of seats that are available now. It's gone up from 338 to 343. I don't know quite why that is. I suppose it's a bit like us. They've had boundary changes and things like that in. He did have quite a sort of substantial lead in the House with the amount of seats he had, but that has gone right down now. He's not doing very well. He certainly hasn't got a majority government now. But these elections are due in October, although it could come sooner, depending, because there's a lot going on with him at the minute. Now, Justin Trudeau is a WEF man through and through. He's been brought through Klaus Schwab's little school of leaders, if you like to call it that. So he's very much a WEF man, and he has been imposing lots of things on Canada that perhaps shouldn't have been imposed at all. But he is now in a position which is not very good, because 20 of his own MPs have put in a motion of no confidence and wanting to resign. 20 is quite a lot, really. I mean, that's about, I think he's got about 120 seats. So 20 is quite a big number, isn't it, when you think about that? He's also suffered, I think it's 3 no confidence votes in Parliament, which he's just managed to get through by get past them by the skin of his teeth. But at the moment, 46% of Canadians think he should go. So it's not looking too good at the moment. His own party has slumped down to 16% in the polls, which again is very low. And amongst his own party supporters, 59% of them want a new leader. So I think we can safely say he's on the way out. And the leading guy, the one that's likely to succeed him in one of the other parties, is a guy called Pierre Poilievre. I'm not sure how you say that, but Poilievre will do. And the first thing I wanted to know about him is, was he part of the WEF? Well, it turns out not. Not only does it turn out not, but he has actually said that a government led by him would ban his cabinet ministers from participating in the World Economic Forum, stating that the forum is against the interests of the people. I thought that was quite a phenomenal statement, really. So hopefully Pierre will get in and things will change in Canada, which is, if you look at it, then Canada and America together, that's quite a big loss for the WEF when you think about it, isn't it? So things could change in the new year, but there's also elections coming up in Germany. The German Prime Minister, whatever they call him, Chancellor or whatever it is, he's not doing too well in the polls at the moment. So there's a lot going on there. Poland as well has got them. What was Czechoslovakia, but it's now, is it the Republic of Czechia or something they call it? Anyway, what was the Czech Republic? That would be the easiest way to call it, wouldn't it?
And Slovakia.
Yeah. Well, they've parted, haven't they? So Slovakia is now a different country. So the Republic of the Czech Republic has also got some. Norway as well, and Romania. They've all got elections coming up this year, which could really change the way Europe is run through the European Union and such like.
It looks like Austria's going to have.
Austria may have one as well.
As of today.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot going on there that you want to keep an eye out on. The other one that seems to be in the news at the moment is over at South Korea, the Prime Minister over there, who was elected by the people, but he's like the what would you call it, the Asian Trump. Everybody is making life difficult for him, even though he's there. So just like they made life difficult for Trump, they're doing it the same for this guy in South Korea. So that's interesting, I think, the way things are going. There's a lot of swirling around at the moment, which could take the heat off certain places, I suppose, as far as the WEF are concerned, but we will have to wait and see on that one. So, yeah, quite a lot going there. Obviously, Russia has got problems with Putin as well. I think they're getting fed up with him a little bit. But although I did see something the other day of the original Putin, as I'll call it, who got into power, looks very different from the Putin we've got in now. Now, I don't know whether that's just old age, but someone was going, are these the same guys? Who knows? Who knows? Because Putin, the original Putin, was very much a WEF man, whereas the Putin we've got now is totally against the WEF, which is interesting. But anyway, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But anyway, that's an interesting point. But while we're on the subject of leaders and leadership, I think there's other things going on that, of course, are preparing us for things that are going to happen in the end days that we're in. China has become basically the largest economy in the world now in the way it's going on. And so there's things happening with them. And America, of course, is on the demise at the moment. So there is a shift, or will be a shift, in the balance of power in the world that's likely there. And at the end of the year, that's the year that's just gone, the Telegraph reported that actually China planned to send 92 what they call Wing-Lung armed UAVs, these drones, worth over £1 billion to Libya. In return, and via a UK Shell-based company, so they were getting round the arms embargo that's with Libya, bypassing that, but they were disguised, funny enough, as COVID-19 aid. So you can see there's a lot of skullduggery going on there, but they were going to be exchanged for discounted crude oil. So obviously China needs more and more oil at the moment to do what it's doing, because despite us all having to go carbon zero, they're pumping it out like good uns. They're just, so that's on the go at the moment. But they're also involved in, it was one of their vessels that was involved in cutting through 2 major cables that join Norway and Sweden to the rest of Europe, which hasn't gone down very well, of course. Yeah, that could increase tensions, I think, around what's going on there. And of course, the Chinese leader also announced that the annexation of Taiwan is going to happen. It will not be stopped. I mean, they've been saber rattling over it for years, but it looks like they're in a position now where they think they can really get away with it. So, yeah, what's this space on the leadership front, I think, is the call there. A good news is that Klaus Schwab is standing down. He's retiring from the WEF. I say good news, but he wants Tony Blair to replace him.
Oh.
So you talk about out of the fire and,
Right,
So-
into the fire.
yeah. So we'll see some weapons of mass destruction popping up
Yeah.
somewhere, won't we?
Yeah.
He was actually the man, I believe, that, of course, what's that thing that you commit against your own country? Treason. He did away with the Treason Act because he was the one that was committing treason, sort of thing. So, they get away with these things. So again, watch this space. We'll see where that goes. So I think it's going to be an interesting year from a nation point of view and what's going on. And of course, there is tomorrow, they will be debating in the Parliament whether Starmer should call another election, because someone put out one of these things, got 3.5 million signatures, which is quite high, but no doubt they'll just go, yeah, thanks very much, put it to one side and not do anything about it. But it just goes to show the unrest at the moment that's going on, and everyone is cottoning on to that Starmer being not the guy that he was purporting to be while he was doing the elections. He has become a real dictator, hasn't he, at the moment? So we will see what that is. So that's a little bit on, if you like, the leaders of nations and what's going on there. So let's turn our eyes to Israel. I'm probably not going to tell you anything new here, just give you an update of where things are. Israel has been at war now with Hamas for 15 months. I think I've calculated that right. And of course, the majority of the Gaza Strip has been totally flattened. If you look at the drone sort of footage of it, I mean, it's just completely gone in most places. And that's because Hamas just will not give up. And it's because of the tunnel system underneath that they're trying to get to in order to get to the hostages. Now, it's believed that there are still around 100 hostages at the last count. I think it was actually 101, something like that. But they only believe that 40 are still alive. They think they've killed the others, having done whatever they've done to them, which is terrible, as we know. Hamas is as good as destroyed, but they will not give up the hostages. If they give up the hostages, Israel will end the war. I mean, I think they've made that quite clear. But it doesn't look in any way, shape or form that Hamas is going to do that. So the pounding goes on. And they are continuing to strike tunnels underneath the hospitals and places like that. I think they said on the news, blaming Israel for 200 deaths just over the Christmas period. But they don't take into account that they're not civilian deaths. They say they are, but they're not. They're Hamas fighters. That's quite obvious. And if you see, I don't know whether you follow, what's his name? Who's the guy out? He's from Israel. Can't think of his name. That's the guy, Safazi. Where he gets his footage from, I don't really know, but he's always got up-to-date footage from all over the place. And he manages to get IDF drone footage of them going into places, into the hospitals and places like that. And there's weaponry everywhere of Hamas. You know, children's bedrooms have got rifles and things under the beds and all this. You know, how Hamas can, you know, be looked upon as a good organisation in any way, shape or form, I don't know. But they still bring it back as though it's Israel's fault, of course, but we know it's not. But that still goes on. And then, of course, when Hezbollah sort of entered the war, of course, thinking that they had the backing of Iran, I think they went to the war thinking, we've got all this backing, we'll be all right. And of course, Iran did nothing to start with, did it? It just left them high and dry to a degree. And they felt the full force of Israeli technology and war machines, shall I put it. And they too have been totally decimated. In fact, they're still being hit quite hard. And I think it was yesterday, it could have been the day before, they were hitting parts of Lebanon with such force that it actually created a 2.3 on the Richter scale sort of earthquake. Yeah, I mean, that takes some doing, doesn't it? But that's not because they are hitting him with such, but it's because they are targeting ammunitions, and that when it all goes up, it creates such a huge explosion that can be seen from miles. So they've been doing that, and they continue to do that. And of course, there is another big tunnel network in Lebanon and places like that as well. So they've got a lot to do. When Iran sent a barrage of about 300 missiles in, you remember they all come over that one night, and the idea was to try and deluge them with missiles so that the Iron Dome and that would be overwhelmed and they'd get it. But of course that didn't happen. God protected them on that occasion totally. And in fact, the only thing they managed to kill was one of their own terrorists who happened to have got into Israel and was crossing the road when a bit fell on his head.
I saw that, yeah.
Yes, I mean, it sounds funny, I know, but when you see the actual footage, I mean, he literally steps off and it just comes down and whacks him straight and just kills him outright. He's the only one in the road. Talk about God having a sense of humour. Do you know what I mean in that respect? But anyway, and then of course we had this rather surprising uprising, didn't we, in Iraq? It seemed to come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, everybody just, have I got that right? Iraq? Yeah. Is it Iraq or Syria? Syria. Forget Syria. Syria. In Syria, where all the different groups sort of just rose up against their leader, and I've forgotten his name now. Thank you. Yeah, who's now fled to Russia, of course, having literally taken millions and millions of dollars with him. But even there, he's not safe because there's been 2 assassination attempts apparently on his life already, of which he blames Putin. I mean, you blame Putin when you're in his country. I mean, what do you? There'll be a third one. You see? I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it, when you think about it? You know, if you think it's him, keep it quiet. because we know that Putin will send people anywhere he wants. He's done it
Perhaps he
over
thinks
here.
it's the other Putin, the original.
Well, it could be, yeah, it could be. But I do find that quite funny, really. But yeah, but we've seen film as well of his lifestyle and such, like the amount of old cars and things that he had a collection of about, yeah, huge garage fulls of these cars, you know, and all sorts. So it just goes to show, and of course they've also found thousands of graves as well, where all his enemies have been tortured and put to death. So it is a good riddance to that guy. But unfortunately, we've now got a position where you've got a number of entities within the country vying for power. And that'll be interesting to watch. But the interesting thing is that Israel is taking the situation in hand by strengthening its position. So while they're all messing about with themselves, Israel is moving forward. And Israel is moving forward and strengthening its position in the region. It's literally taken over now the whole of the Golan Heights, which is a good thing, because the Golan Heights were the area that actually everyone wanted them to give up. And if they did give up the Golan Heights, Israel would be totally at everyone's mercy. But now they've reinforced their position, which is good. And they're trying to make, to link up with the area where all the Druze live. Now the Druze are friendly with Israel. They're similar to the Kurds in many ways. They've been put down, but Druze and Israel are sort of friendly. So you can understand why they want to link up to that and give themselves this sort of buffer zone. And but the other thing about that, of course, is that the truce comes to an end, I think, on the 26th of January. So it's only a couple of weeks away, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after that when the truce comes off, as to whether Israel will withdraw or say, no, we're staying where we are. They seem to be making permanent outpost places for protection, so they can keep an eye on everything. So we shall see. But it did go through my mind, actually, that, you know, is this the time when actually they regain a lot of the land? You know, because, well, I mean, we have this sort of idea, don't we, that they've never had all their land, but they're going to take it, you know, and it's going to be this big bang smack, we've got it all back. But it's actually bit by bit, it seems to be, that they're grabbing it back. So again, watch this space. We'll see where that takes us. Yes. But while that's all going on, of course, the world has gone mad with anti-Semitism, as we know. It does appear that every nation almost is against Israel now, doesn't it? There's very few nations that are really backing Israel. And there's certainly no other nations outside the Middle East that are attacking Israel at the moment, which is good. Because I would have expected by now, with them moving into Lebanon and with them so on, that some nations, including perhaps Russia or whatever, would have sort of bristled their guns at them a little bit and said enough's enough. But no one. They're all keeping very quiet on the ground, shall we say. The Russians have moved off from Syria. They've withdrew, and of course we know that Russia is part of Gog and Magog, that's talked about in Ezekiel 38. They've withdrawn, leaving Iran almost on its own at the moment. But those two nations are not part of the Psalm 83 nations either, are they? So the ones that are around Israel are the sort of Psalm 83 nations that obviously Israel will destroy if it hasn't already happened. I mean, they've had a couple of chances at it, that's for sure. But with what's going on at the moment, it's interesting that no one else has come against Israel in that respect. So Israel is consolidating itself while that's going on. And perhaps this will give them the peace that they desire, you know, because we've looked at this before, that before the Lord comes and before the Antichrist raises his head properly, there's going to be this time of peace. And so is this the time when they are creating the conditions that they can actually live in peace? Possibility, isn't it? Because Ezekiel 37 actually says, God says, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and I will put my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy when my sanctuary is among them forever. Now, I know that that's not been sort of fully recognised yet. That hasn't been completed, but perhaps that's where we're leading at the moment, that they're going to have this time of peace. Interestingly, when it says I will establish them and increase their numbers, they have just passed the 10 million mark, Israel have, of population, which is incredible, isn't it, really, when you think about that. So God is increasing them despite everything that's going on in the world at the moment. We also know that there will be a time of peace and safety, because Ezekiel 38 verse 8 says, after many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war. And that's talking about Israel having recovered from war. And it's talking about Gog and Magog being brought out. Those people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel that had long been desolate. They have been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. So there's got to be this time of safety for Israel, this time of peace. And that may well be coming sooner than we think because of what's been happening. I think Israel has showed itself to be a top military nation, and those around about haven't got the means to retaliate. Well, they haven't got God on their side either, have they? So it's going to be a bit, So 10 million is what they've reached. That's quite amazing considering they've only been a nation for 76 years. That's quite remarkable. They have, by all probability, the most advanced army in the world now with their technology capabilities. Because for some, I don't know how they do it, but the IDF, along with the Shin Bet and all of those sort of security forces, seem to know just about where everybody is at any given time. And I find that quite amazing. So their capabilities are far above, I think, any of those nations around about them, that's for sure. And they've certainly dealt well with those fanatical about doing away with Israel. They've certainly answered. Those phones was incredible, wasn't it? The planning that must have gone into all of those, and then to hit them, you know what I'm talking about, those things, was incredible, really. But not to kill them all, but just to take them out of the picture was really an amazing thing. I don't know how many, it was thousands, wasn't it? But yeah, I mean, to do that is quite incredible. Long may they reign in that respect, because you know now that everybody whose phone rings, they're start going, shall I answer it or shan't I? Put the wind up.
I wonder what they're using instead. Pigeons, maybe.
Well, yeah, makes you wonder, doesn't it? But the other thing is, of course, and this is what I find fascinating, not only have they, like with Hamas, not only have they gone for the leadership and killed every one of the Hamas leaders and their replacements to a degree, they have gone after everybody who was involved in the October 7th. And that's who they're hunting at the moment. And they are going for each and every one that they know is involved. It's not all just kill whoever. They are targeting these people. And the same with Hezbollah. They've targeted all of their leadership and done away with them. And again, those that come into the positions after them suddenly die. They know who they are. And they're sending that message that they can more or less do what they want to do with these people, which you would have thought by now they'd have put their hands up and gone, okay, we'll stop. But of course they don't. So yeah, interesting that. They've secured the Golan Heights, I've mentioned that. It's also amazing that the UN forces have just, where are they gone? Because between them and Lebanon was the UN sort of forces. Now, I've been to an army outpost that looks over into Lebanon, right on the borders with Syria, and you can see the Syrian army over there. You can see the UN troops down there, and the Hezbollah was over in there, and they're all keeping an eye on each other. But it just seems that the UN force have just, well, we know that they've been helping Hezbollah. I mean, either that or they're all blind, one of the two. But it is coming out now that quite a few of the UN troops have been handed money and such like to turn a blind eye to their tunnel making and stuff like that on the border. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But okay, we'll see what effect that is. But they're consolidating anyway, and they're going to make this sort of no man's land, I think, around them. So that'll be good to see. Now, while that's been happening, of course, there is the Yemen problem, the Houthis, or Houthis, whatever you want to call them, those rebels who are also firing ballistic missiles and things into Israel. And again, fortunately, they haven't had any success with that. Those missiles have all been shot down, and we have to be grateful for the UK Navy and the Americans, because they've also had a part in that. But interestingly enough, the UN Assistant General Secretary, talking about the attacks with Israel and Yemen, called on both sides to respect international law. But Israel hasn't done anything to Yemen. It never attacked Yemen at all. It was Yemen attacked Israel. So it really needs to be Yemen is the one that needs to look to international law and respect that, not them. But again, they're blaming Israel. But I think Israel will turn towards Yemen next, and I think they'll give them a good battering. They need it, don't they, to stop them doing what they're doing, really. But the other thing that was raised by the UN, which I found quite interesting, was again the General Assembly, or it was brought up that about Israel's nuclear weapons, and the UN General Assembly voted that Israel should dispose of whatever nuclear weapons it's got and hand over its nuclear bases and everything to the United Nations. Well, despite the fact that Israel has never actually disclosed whether it has got nuclear weapons or not, so we don't know. I suspect they have, but they've never said one way or the other. But the UN want to bring it all under their Atomic Energy Agency, which we know is a fantastic organisation that can't even keep Iran from building a nuclear weapon. So despite the fact that the Republic of Iran, who were told that they couldn't build stuff, have continued and no one has stopped them, and the Atomic Agency haven't been able to get in to check, despite all of that, they turn to Israel and go, you've got to give all yours up. You know, I mean, it's just pathetic, really, isn't it, the way things are going. And so Iran has constantly gone against the plan of action that was put in, and of course is deceiving the authorities as well. You know, they can get away with that, and they're still being allowed to get away with that, but Israel is being told to hand over its sites. And in fact, this is what the resolution said. It said that they had to, this is to Israel, they have to accede to the treaty without further delay. This is the non-professional, whatever of nuclear arms, the treaty, without further delay, not to develop, produce, test or otherwise acquire nuclear weapons, to renounce possession of nuclear weapons, and to place all its unsafeguarded nuclear facilities under the full scope of agency safeguards as an important confidence building measure among all states of the region, and as a step towards enhancing peace and security. You just couldn't make that up, really, could you? So in order for peace and security to be in the Middle East, Israel has got to give up its nuclear weapons, even though Israel has never said anything about nuclear weapons or even threatened nuclear weapons. And yet Mr. Putin has threatened to get out his nuclear weapons in the Ukraine war, and yet we've done nothing about that whatsoever. So there you go. You know, we've got an unstable country like Iran that's totally terror-based, being allowed to build, even though it goes against what the UN said. We've got Putin saying that he might well use them, and all we do is turn on Israel. Typical UN, I would say. So that's what's going on with Israel at the moment, amongst other things. But what I did feel was quite sad was that, in comparison to obviously their enemies, Israel has still lost 500 odd troops. but 17 of them were committed suicide, which I find was very sad. And it does seem that the war is taking its toll on the Israeli forces because of the continuing, you know, they are getting sort of war drunk, if you know what I mean. That's not good. But when they start taking their own lives as well, that's not good either, is it? But so we need to continue to pray for them. We don't hear much about their casualties. I think they've had about 5,000 injured and about 500 dead in the war, which in terms of one against the other, they've done very well, but it's still a lot, and it's still not good. So continue to obviously to pray for Israel on that. Right, thirdly, I don't know what the time is, by the way, it's what? 20 past 8, okay. Right, so the third thing I want you to look at is the UK leading the WEF charge, the World Economic Forward charge? In other words, are they carrying out what the WEF want? And I think the easy answer is to say yes, because Starmer is very much a WEF man. I have said this before, but in an interview on television, he was asked whether he was a Parliament man or a WEF man, and without even taking a breath, he said WEF. So, yeah. So we know where he stands on that. But anyway, since Brexit, I'm still not convinced whether Brexit has happened, but since Brexit, we have been in disarray over the illegal immigrants that are coming to our shores in the boats, haven't we? And the government has done absolutely nothing about that at all. The only thing it's done is, as I was saying earlier, it's used the NRLI, which is a charity-based organisation, to help bring them to our shores, really, instead of sending them back to where they come from. And I'm not being horrible about the people on the boats, but they shouldn't be coming. That's the point. They shouldn't be coming. It's been a total failure. And you look around and we're building housing like never before to house a nation, as in the English, that is in decline. We don't need that amount of housing because we're in the decline. So what is the housing for? And it would appear that it's for these people coming across, because who else is it for? I mean, that is open to conjecture or whatever, but we are also one of the most watched countries in the world. I mean, we've got more CCTV cameras per capita than any other nation, I think, in the world, more or less. So what's that all about, really? Is that getting... I get the feeling that the British Isles is being made the place where they're going to pump everybody into and keep an eye on them for when the elite sort of try and take over. The laws that are coming in now are just stripping us of our freedoms, and they're bringing in laws that don't need to be brought in because they're already accounted for in law. So, like when we had these laws brought in against people that were in Southport and doing all that, they made these laws. They could already be tried under law that was already in. So, you know, what are we doing there? We're bringing in extra laws that can only take away freedoms or make it easier to put people in prison, which Starmer is doing very well. So, is he leading the charge? Well, I think he's certainly creating the conditions for what will be the elite to totally suppress us at the end of the day. Now, climate change does appear to be the driver for everything that they are doing these days, and the government in this country has decided that we are going to go for net zero. Now, just to put that in its perspective, what that means is that when it comes to CO2, the makeup of CO2 is 0.04% of the atmosphere. Very small, I think. Or hang on, no, I might have got that wrong. The amount of CO2, what is created by humanity, is 0.04% of it. Either way, it's a very small proportion. And so the idea of bringing net zero in would be to get rid of that 0.04%, which is going to make no difference whatsoever. But anyway, that's where it is. That's belching out CO2 and stuff like that. So whatever we do here is going to be totally of no effect whatsoever So we're going to pay for something that will have no effect. That's really where all this is going. But climate change is the thing. I mean, it started under the Conservatives with Rishi Sunak, but he was at the end wavering over net zero because he was saying it was too costly. And he was right to say that, not only because it's a waste of time, but it is going to cost this country everything to try and get there. You'll never do it, but they're trying every which way they can. Now, what I found very interesting was there is a company that was set up by the government called the Carbon Trust. Now, the Carbon Trust, as you might understand, looks into carbon, or at least the climate change carbon effect. And one of its websites says the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which provides the most widely recognised accounting standards for greenhouse gas emissions, categorises GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, into 3 scopes. Scope 1 covers direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 covers indirect emissions from the purchase and use of electricity, steam, heating and cooling by using the energy an organisation is indirectly responsible for the release of these GHG emissions. Scope 3 includes all other indirect emissions that occur in the upstream and downstream activities of an organisation. So basically, they've got it into 3 scopes that cover just about everything. Okay, and they put out a white paper, and I have a copy of it here, which is quite interesting, really, because this white paper was done over a very short period using very few people, and yet they've come up with this policy that the UK government is adopting that's going to really trap you and cause you problems. Now, to try and get your head around this, and it was very hard actually to try and see where this was going and get the information that they are using and such like that. But what I've come up with is this. This white paper has been put together for the government, and the government are going to take it forward, and eventually they will bring it into law, because that's what a white paper is about. You know, you put forward the white paper and it eventually will go forward if that's what they want it to do. And the reason that I'm telling you about this today is that it will affect you by rationing what you can have and what you can eat. All right? Because it all evolves around your personal CO2 tax allowance. This is what they're bringing in through this report. So the scope actually of the report is about ways in which they can change your behaviour. Well, we've seen what they've done with COVID, and they tried to change your behaviour with that. So this is all about control. Now, the purpose of the report is stated as a sustained long-term reduction of our collective environmental impact that can only be achieved if significant changes are made to existing patterns of consumption. This will require a significant change in consumer behaviour. You and me, our behaviour. Okay, that's what they're scared. And the object of the report, or one of the objects, was to establish the feasibility of introducing a personal tax allowance to provide context for consumers about the carbon footprint of typical activities, including eating, shopping and commuting. So they're looking at every way they can to see if a personal tax allowance can be used to cover all these things. And you know how we've got used to the fact that the way we eat and things is roughly 2,000 calories a day for a lady, and 2,500 for a man. And if you're a youngster, then it's about 1,000 and something. We've got used to calorie counting, haven't we? Well, this is going to take over from, if you like, calorie counting to carbon dioxide counting, if you see what I mean. This is where this is going. I've got to put it like that because I can't think of a better way of putting it, really. But anyway, what you're going to get really, if they bring this in, which I believe they will, is a tax allowance that will allow you so many CO2 points. Now, apparently, on certain foods in the shops at the moment, you will see that there is a CO2 rating on them, and that's coming in. So not only have we got these different colours for fats and sugars and all the rest of it, now you've got this little CO2 rating, as opposed. So what they want to get you away from is not calorie counting, but CO2 counting. That's really what it is. So everything has been given a CO2 value. Now, the report divided what they were looking at into 8 particular segments that covered commuting, so that's work commute, personal daily travel, so just going out for a jaunt type thing, electricity, gas, food and drink, holidays, and leisure and lifestyle type activities. Well, that just about covers everything, doesn't it, really? So everything in your life is going to be governed by this personal tax allowance, is what this document is saying. So the report looked at the daily emissions total for the UK, and according to the figures then, now this was originally put out in 2012, but it's being re-looked at now and taken forward. So the figures that were quoted then, now when they added it all up, half of the emissions that they come up was to do with the government and, if you like, our government services. The other half was to do with what we do. So of course they took the government bit out of the way and just concentrated on what we do. Yet the policy went on to say that you will still have to pay for that usage. That's it. So if you want to take your rates that are for police, fire and all of those things, they will have a CO2 value that will come against that you will have to pay for. So it's all involved in that, really. Anyway, just to give you some figures, and I'll try and be as quick as I can. Between those 8 categories, a person emits at the moment roughly 23.1 kilograms of CO2 per day. So the way you live your life, that's what they've said in the various ways, using those 8 categories, that's what you do. But they want a target to be brought down so that you will only do 19.9 kilograms per day. So they've cut off basically what, just over 3 kilograms. So you might think, well, that's not too bad. But anyway, over time and every year, that's going to start coming down and down and down. So they have the purpose is to reduce your CO2 output, if you like. Now, based on the current data available, the UK national carbon footprint is 869 million tonnes of CO2. That's what we do as the UK every year, okay, with a population of about 60 million. So if you divide that 60 million into the 869 million tonnes, it gives you a daily allowance, they've worked out, of 40 kilograms per day of CO2. But you've got to take off half of that, really, because that's the government bit. So you have no control over that. So in a sense, you are only getting 20 kilograms of CO2 output per day. Are you still with me? Okay. Now, under the guidelines, this carbon footprinting standard, which is really hard to come across, but they quote in this report that a can of Coca-Cola, because Coca-Cola were involved in the report, was 170 grams of CO2 emissions. That, to make a can of Coke, including the tin, the drink and everything, is 170 grams of CO2. Now, if you have a can of Coca-Cola in your daily allowance, that's 4% of your daily allowance in a can of Coke. That's what it amounts to, okay? Well, that's if you take the 40k, but if you cut 20k off, actually it becomes 8%, doesn't it, when you think about it? A 200 gram beef steak comes out at 80% of your daily allowance. So if you want a steak, that's all you're going to have in there. Now so you can see where this is going, as in this, we've got to get rid of the cows, haven't we? That's what they want. They want you to have this fake meat and all the rest of it. So I'm not surprised that in their calculations, beef comes quite high. 2 slices of bread is 3%. or 6% if you take the 20 off. So that's quite a lot, isn't it, when you think about it? So they're bringing in this labelling of food products and packaging. Now, it's happening, whether we like it or not. They are bringing it in. They don't tell you much about it, but it's being brought in. And so we are now in the stage where we are being conditioned through the report and through the media and such like to once again try and change our habits for the sake of the planet. So we've got to save the planet. Of course it's rubbish. That's that. But this is the way it's going. But we don't end there. So having trawled the internet for ages, it took me ages to come up with something that could give me some extra sort of things as to what was what. So if you want a serving of pork, for instance, that would be the equivalent of 1.8 kilograms of CO2 for just a 75 gram serving. So if you take that down as that's good, 1.8, that's about 1.8% of your total, something like that. You can see how this is going to add up to rationing you. If you go out for just a latte, that's 350 grams of carbon dioxide. One banana, though, is only 70 grams, so that's quite low. You can have a banana. But the average meal comes out at 1.5 kilograms. And that's a smallish meal. That's only 600 calories of a meal. That's not very big. Well, it isn't for me anyway. So they've looked through everything. They've even looked through consumption. So if you use a plastic bag, for instance, so if you go to the shop and you want a plastic bag, that's 33 grams of CO2. If you want a plastic water bottle or you buy a water bottle, that's 83 grams of CO2. A disposable cup of coffee will cost you 16 grams of CO2. Using your mobile phone for 1 hour is 172 grams of CO2. Okay, so you can see where this is going in a sense, can't you? Now, if you want to go on a flight, all right. Well, first of all, if you walk or bike, that won't cost you nothing. All right, that's okay. If you go on public transport for 20 minutes, that will cost you 244 grams of CO2. If you go for a car ride for 10 minutes, that's 560 grams of CO2. That's quite a lot, isn't it? So you can see that you're going to start choosing, well, have I got enough CO2 to be able to go down the road to the shop? Or have I got then enough to buy certain things? So we're going back to a sort of form of rationing. That's really, if you want to go by train and you take a 2-hour train ride, actually that's quite cheap. That's only 17 kilograms. But if you take a flight, a 1-hour flight will cost you 40 kilograms. That's a daily ration of your CO2 to go on a very short flight. Okay, so if you want to go across the pond to New York, that will cost you 1.8 tons of CO2. Now, how many days have I got to go without food and drink in order to save up for that? You see what I mean? So it's gonna really knock that on the head, isn't it? So it covers everything, really. It's quite amazing what it does cover. And so, in a sense, how much of your CO2 credit would you need to just go on holiday? It's going to cost you a fortune, isn't it? You're going to go hungry for 3 months of the year just to go away for a week, type thing. So you can see how this is going to limit your life if and when this comes in. Anyway, the thing that did come to mind was, of course, we've been looking at cash being done away with and going digital. And that may be just the first step, so that we go digital in our cash, but then we go from digital cash to CO2. Gotcha. Totally reliant then, aren't you, on what you're doing. But the good thing is, if you don't use all your daily allowance, you can sell it to somebody else. No, you can give them your CO2 for, do a bit of swapping, because there won't be no cash if it goes down that line, will it? Do you know what I mean? So, if I fast for 2 days, that might allow you to go on holiday for a day. It's not good, is it? totally not good. That's the scenario that we have here.
I don't remember any of this, Steve, being in any political party.
No,
manifesto.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. But there's the white paper. There's the white paper.
Who's the author of that?
It's this this Carbon Trust Advisory and the Coca-Cola Company have done it together. But when you look at it, it is such a small report in terms of the number of people that they have used, and they've obviously picked the people they want to give them the answers they want and whatever. But it's gonna. That's what they're looking at coming in, and it's a UK government company. So the UK government is involved in this. How far down the line it'll be beforehand, I don't know.
What's Coca-Cola going to gain out of this?
Well, nothing, are they, in a sense, apart from people living off Coke. I don't know, you know. But it's just again another thing to control people.
It's like the social credit score in China, isn't it?
Well, exactly. So if you transfer the social credit that you would get, because if they take away all your money, you'll have to have a social credit, what they give you anyway, and then they convert that over to CO2. You're totally. There's no black market because you won't be able to really do it. I mean, how do you literally, if you like, how can I give you some CO2, if you know what I mean, points? I can't, but you will get these points, and how it will work. And it was funny actually, I did click on, I think it was this particular website. When you click on it, the first thing that comes up is this green sort of card that basically says CO2 credit card. And you think, yeah, I can see where this is really going. And it, you know, that's the way it is. So watch this space, because I dare say it is going to raise its ugly head in the future. Okay, now I've put you down there. Let me just get to the last thing. We're not going to be here, I'm sure of that. I'm sure the rapture will come first, I'm sure of that. Just lastly then, sorry, what is the time now? Of course you're right, okay, good. I'm nearly done. Tabletop exercises. And the next contagion of possibly 2025. Now, you may remember way back in the days of COVID, just before COVID, that hit us in 2020, didn't it? In 2019, Bill Gates Foundation, along with the Johns Hopkins Institute and the WEF, held a tabletop exercise that was called Event 201. Do anyone remember that? Yeah. Caused a bit of a sort of stink afterwards, because Event 201 was a so-called fictional scenario, and they made this point that it was fictional, about a coronavirus acute pulmonary syndrome called CAPS, which causes an acute respiratory distress and pneumonia. This virus, which has existed, this is off their thing, by the way. This virus has existed in the fruit bat population, but which appears to have managed to transmit itself into pigs and then mutated to human beings. Now, if I recall, when COVID came out, it started with the theory of the fruit bats, didn't it? And then it went into some Chinese market, apparently. Now, whether it had anything to do with pigs or not, I don't know. But then all of a sudden it was being done with humans. And so only a few months, and it was literally only a few months between this scenario being played out, we got COVID. There was definitely a link between the two, although they will deny it, totally deny it. But anyway, I looked back, and there's been a number of tabletop scenarios. They're nothing new, but back in 2001, they had one called Dark Winter. And Dark Winter was an exercise to do with a smallpox attack on the US. So it was quite a limited sort of thing, really. But it was in the context of tensions in the Taiwan Straits. Oh, well, Taiwan Straits, how about that? Haven't we got the American and Chinese fleets at the moment, even now, on the standoff? Anyway, then in 2005, they held another one. I couldn't remember the name of this one, but it was about a bioterrorist attack, again, using smallpox. Now, interestingly enough, smallpox has come up again recently to do with the monkeypox virus, that they were going to look for a vaccine that contained live smallpox. why would you give somebody live smallpox? Because all that will do is give them smallpox. Anyway, I'm just being a little bit facetious there, aren't I? 2018, they had tabletop exercise Cladex, and that was to do with government and health leaders making various decisions and what they would need to do in the event of, another apocalyptic event. 2019, they had Event 201, which I just mentioned. And in fact, if you remember, following COVID, Bill Gates came out and said, the next one will get you, and it will get the children more. I don't know whether you remember that. He came out and said specifically that the next one will, and my first thought was, how does he know that? How does he know that, one, there's going to be another one, and two, that it will affect children more than it will affect adults? But he did come out and say that. So anyway, following COVID, in October 2022, they held another tabletop exercise called Catastrophic Contagion. Now, this was in partnership with the Bill Gates Foundation again, the Johns Hopkins Institute, and the World Health Organization. Strange, that. Anyway, the scenario that they were using was set in 2025. Oh, that's where we are right now. Okay, so we'll see what happens on that one. But anyway, it's centred on a pandemic that started in one country and then spread to the rest of the world with a higher fatality rate, far higher fatality rate than COVID-19, and predominantly affecting children and young people. That was part of the scenario. Okay. If you remember, back last year, the end of last year, the WHO were pushing to get all member states, which is just about everybody in the world, to back a bill, if you like, that said that the WHO could bring in a pandemic for any reason they liked. It was so loose that if they decided that you sneezed, it was a pandemic, right? And they could bring it in. And having brought it in, all countries would be under their command, if you like. So that's what they were doing. And they really did try to get it in by the end of, or in December, because that was going to be the end time for what they were doing. But fortunately, due to people such as Citizen Go, which I'm not necessarily a keen supporter of them, but they put a lot of pressure. They put people on the street out there that were at the hotel where these meetings were taking place, and putting pressure on these leaders that they couldn't get an agreement. So there wasn't agreement to pass this piece of legislation, I suppose you'd call it, but they did do a backdoor thing, which means that they've basically got it in anyway, which is this is what governments do, isn't it? You know, and I know that there were many people that wrote to the government, our government, about it, saying do not back this, and the government response was that they did back it. It was under the Conservatives at the time. They did back it, and I think it's totally 100% that Starmer will as well, because that's part of the WF thing at the end of the day, isn't it? So what we have here, of course, is a one world government in the making, because as soon as you set a pandemic, it all comes under the control of the WHO, and one man is in control. That's really what it means, which is why it's so dangerous that we do that. So we have here with this. Now, whether this contagion will happen this year or not, I don't know. But I suspect something will come up. So be aware that something may be on the horizon, whatever that might be, I don't know. But the fact that they set it in 2025 could mean that it happens this year. Who knows? We will see. But certainly, with all that's going on, this has a one world government scenario in the making, stamped right over it. And of course, it will be a peaceful takeover, won't it? There won't be no war. It will be peaceful, because people will look around them and see people dropping dead like flies and go, we need help. And they will follow the rules. Interestingly, I wasn't going to mention this, but we've recently had quite a lot of fog, haven't we? I don't know whether you noticed that. There was some very thick, we didn't have it around here, but there was some very thick fog. Now, apparently, at the same time, there was fog in lots of countries of the world, and there was a lot of people reporting that were in the fog that they started to feel quite unwell. Now, whether this fog was natural fog or was it a man-made fog, we'll have to wait and see. But there was something going on. The same as it would appear that they're sort of priming certainly the US and that at the moment for the old UFO business with all these drones in the sky, wondering what's going on. No one seems to know much about them whatsoever. Now, is it China? I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought if it was a threat from another country that America would have shot them down now. But for some other reason they haven't. They've been allowing the fear to grow as to what these drones or whatever they are. But I suspect that they will come out with something of the extraterrestrial nature, possibly, is coming towards us. We will see, but it's quite a possibility,
Fear,
I think.
more fear.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. It's creating fear amongst the world's population. So that's my update, if you like. It doesn't cover the Russia-Ukraine war. I've kept away from that, but I know that Tony Pierce has covered it in his December issue of his prophecy update, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So I thought I'd leave that and I'll let someone better than me deal with that one. But yes, we can expect more things to happen, I'm sure. But it's just a little update, and I hope it was worth the while you come in just to see there. But we just need to continue to be watchful. As I said this morning in church, we need to continue to be discerning with what's going on, and of course keeping faithful to the Lord in spreading the gospel while we have time, because all of these things will be eroded over time as things go on. So the future in one way is not rosy, but for us it is, because as these things come, the Lord's coming is that much closer. And so we trust in him, of course, to take us at some point, that's for sure.